Okay, good evening, and I'm going to start right off and share my screen. Okay, so good evening. My name is Monica Elliott, and I am Voter Services Chair for the League of Women Voters of Broward County. There may be some attendees who are either new to the league or may not even be league members. So I do want to point out that the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, and that means that we have never supported or opposed political candidates or parties in the National League's 105-year history. Our local league is not that old, but that is actually how old the League of Women Voters is. So tonight we are primarily coming together because I want to tell you how to educate voters. And when you educate a voter, that also means that voters are going to be empowered. I mean, the primary reason for the league was formed in 1920 was to help educate women on candidates and policy issues so that they could be informed voters. And that is essentially what we are still doing. So here's the purpose of this presentation. My goal is to educate league members so you are knowledgeable about the upcoming 2026 elections. You know where to go for information about voting, candidates, and issues. And then you can be an accurate source of information for your families, friends, social groups, religious groups, whatever groups you might be a part of. You will be that source of information. Once you have this knowledge, we hope that you will use it to help the Broward League at our tabling events in the community. Essentially, what that means is we go to a lot of festivals, we set up a table, and we provide the information that we have to the community. You may perhaps become a speakers bureau presenter. We will have a Decision 2026 presentation to present starting probably about mid-June. And then the other thing is to help us formulate questions for the different candidate forums. When we talk about the Speakers Bureau, just going back to that for a minute, even if you do not want to be a speaker per se, one of the things we would love to have you do is to ask your organization to invite us, because we do that presentation to any group that will have us, no matter who or what they are, because all we're trying to do is educate the community. We're also going to talk about the website vote411.org and how you can use it to educate yourself about the ballot, and then you can promote it to everyone you know. I did not know about Vote 411 when I joined the league. And so learning about that was just an eye-opener, and I have been an evangelist for it ever since. And then something to consider, but we won't talk about it tonight, is becoming a poll worker, a poll monitor, or even a canvassing board monitor. I admit these are hard jobs, but they're important to the integrity of our elections. So I've divided tonight's presentation into two topics: voter access to the ballot and voter education. But before I begin, I want to ask you that if you can, to put any questions you have as I'm speaking into the chat. At certain points in the presentation, I will stop and answer those questions. And it will help me be more efficient if you limit the chat to the questions, so you don't have to sort out comments from the questions. And then if there's verbal questions, in other words, if you can't put your question into the chat, I will answer any verbal questions at the end of the presentation. So we're going to begin. And the first off is, what is the difference? What do I mean by voter access to the ballot? And that's where we're going to talk about voter registration and voter ID. And then for voter education, I will elaborate on the why, when, where, and what associated with voting itself. So this is the deadline for voter registration actions, whether it's a new voter registration or if you're updating. A new voter registration has to be completed 29 days before the next election. We are a closed primary state, so that means that if you want to vote in a primary election, you have to register with the party 29 days before that primary election. Now, for everything else, if you're already registered, but you need to update your registration record, there is no deadline. You can even update at the polls on election day. You can change your residential address, you can do a name change, you can update your signature. You can do that essentially at the very last minute when you're there in front of the poll worker. One question I want to talk about or discuss at the very beginning is who or what is the league relative to a third-party voter registration organization? And it's often referred to as a 3P VRO. We have to register the league at the state level. We register as a 3P VRO. And that does allow us to collect any completed blank voter or otherwise non-blank voter registration applications from a voter. However, that is not what we do anymore. When SB 7050 passed, it placed too many restrictions on 3P VROs, and the fines for any error were too great. They were upwards of $50,000. So as a league, we stopped collecting those completed voter registration forms to give to the local county supervisor of elections. But we are still helping citizens register to vote. So we haven't exactly stopped what we're doing. We're just doing it in a very different way than what we're used to, or what if you were helping prior to 2023. Oops, went the wrong way. So one of the things that you're going to find out if you help at our table with community events is that you're soon going to learn that the vast majority of people that we encounter are already registered to vote. Broward County has over 90% voter registration. The problem is we just don't vote. Now, get out the vote, that's a totally different conversation, another presentation, discussions that we have to have. We're just focusing on the mechanics here today. So what we are actually doing when we're tabling is asking people if their voter registration is up to date. I mean, we are going to ask, if they are registered, but most of the time we're asking if their voter registration is up to date. Have they changed their name or have they moved? Do they need to update their signature, for example? These are the things that we are doing. And let's see. I seem to have lost the screen here for just a moment. Let me stop sharing. And let me try sharing again. That was kind of odd. Okay, now I can see what's going on again. We always ask if they need to request a vote by mail ballot. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So one of the things I'm going to ask you is that you go to the Broward County Supervisor of Elections website, and you'll see it here in just a moment, and review it. Get to know what's on the website. Where would you go for the information? Because once you know where that information is at, then you can help others. And another thing is, if you find an error on that website, let me know and I'll check it out. And if in fact it is an error of information, I will let the SOE office know that. I go through their website quite a bit, and I have recently found an error in regards to returning citizens, and they were kind enough, they corrected it as soon as possible. I mean, they have hundreds of pages on that website, so it's really difficult to make sure they're getting everything corrected as it changes. So this is the Broward County Supervisor of Elections website. Bookmark it on your phone, on your home computer, and your laptop. So it's browardvotes.gov. And again, just get to know this website. Everything you need to know about elections is here in one place or another. When you look at the area below, request your vote by mail ballot, because essentially this is just one small portion, the top portion of the website. That's where they usually put any updated information or last minute information. So there's just loads of information that's there. The important icon right now is the one at the far right that I have circled in yellow, the voter info. And after this meeting, I would appreciate it if you check it out so that you can see if your information is correct. So this is what that voter information lookup web page looks like. So once you fill in the required boxes, all of your voter registration information is going to show up on your screen. And it's going to inform you that if you are registered to vote in Broward, I mean, if you're not registered, you're going to get that error message, but I'm assuming everybody here is registered. And you can determine if your information is correct, your residential address, for example, and even if you have already requested a vote by mail. There's lots of information there. It's even going to tell you, what districts you are in at, federal, state, county, and city level. So if you want to know, well, who's my House of Representatives? What is that district? That's information is here. If you look, you can look it up. So it's just really, really critical to know everything you can about the website so you can help others. One thing I want to bring up is a current issue that does have some ramifications throughout the state. And so the flyer that you see here on the left side of your screen is dealing with that issue. And so we do have this on our table. Starting last August 1st, well, actually August 1st, 2024, there were updates occurring to your driver's license number or identification card number when you renewed, updated, or replaced. Now, this is not something nefarious at all. It just sort of shows you the law of unintended consequences. To make our driver's license or our ID card numbers more secure and decrease fraud, new numbers are being issued over time as people renew. They may have to update, or perhaps it's stolen and they have to replace it. What's happening is that some people are receiving error messages when they request their vote by mail ballot online, or they try to update their voter registration record online. So it's not happening to everybody, and there is coordination going on between the Department of Motor Vehicles and Highway Safety and the Department of State Division of Elections. And they're trying to get that fixed so that essentially the computers are talking to each other. But it's just something that we need to be aware of. I was working with one of the people who was on the noon call, and they had run into this problem. You should be able to simply call the Broward County Supervisor of Elections office and ask them to change it. Now, she had tried that, and the person she ended up getting hold of didn't seem to be aware of this. But I know the SOE office is more than aware of it. Joe Scott is aware of it. All the supervisors of elections are aware of this issue. So in theory, you should just be able to call and get this fixed. If you run into the problem, let me know and I'll work with you. So now we're going to go on to the requirements to register and vote in Florida. You have to be a U.S. citizen, a Florida resident, and you have to be at least 18 years old in order to vote. But you can pre-register between the ages of 16 and 18. And Joe Scott does go into the high schools in the spring to do this. And he registered almost 10,000 pre-18-year-olds last year. And so this is something that he does on a very regular basis. There has to be no court order of mental incapacity and then no felony conviction, or the right to vote must have been restored. And again, dealing with returning citizens is an entirely different issue, and we're really not going to talk about that today because we're still trying to work some of the issues through in terms of how we can help this particular population. So again, the league can help people register online. They can be doing it with their own electronic device in terms of their own phone, or if you bring a laptop, we often will bring a laptop, or maybe even use your phone to check out the website to see if they are registered or to help them register right there on the spot. Young people, they can manage to register to vote in 5 minutes. My fat fingers is pretty bad about that, but they're really good at this. We actually prefer people to register online because there are fewer errors. I have to say, and you probably know this, people's handwriting is atrocious. And so when you fill out something with a paper on a paper form, and then somebody at the supervisor of elections is trying to figure out what that letter is, what that number is, that's when you're going to start to see errors occur. And so we do prefer the online registration. But we can also use the paper form. And for Broward County only, we actually have a very nice bifold voter registration application. Joe Scott is our supervisor of elections. He is super pro voter, advocates for the voter, and he tries to make everything associated with voting as easy as possible. And it also helps leagues and other organizations who are third-party voter registration organizations. So he developed these bifold mailers, and they are pre-addressed to the supervisor of elections office, and the postage is prepaid. And we hand this out to people, even if they say that they're going to register online. I like to do it, and I know Andrea Sleeper, who helps out with voter services, likes to do it. It's big. It's not going to hopefully it won't get lost, and it's got useful voter information in it. And so don't hesitate to hand these out. They only charge us $5 for 100 of them. So, it's very cost worthy. When you go to the inside of this bifold mailer, that's where you'll see the statewide voter registration form. So this is what it looks like when we're dealing with paper. Lines 1 through 6 must be filled out. Essentially, the lines with the black box on the left edge are lines that must be completed in order for your voter registration for them to process it. We encourage people to include both their driver's license ID and the last 4 digits of the Social Security number so that their record is complete. It's not required, but we highly encourage it. The primary mistake that we see on the form occurs on line 6. People think it is asking for country, but it's asking for county. And so they start to put in USA, and no, it needs to be Broward. Again, these bifold mailers only work in Broward County. And then they need to sign and date on line 15. And they should use the signature on their Florida driver's license or ID card. And the reason for doing this is that way, in their head, voter registration is tied to Florida driver's license or ID card. And so when they were trying to remember, well, how do I sign, for example, the outside of the mailing envelope for a vote by mail ballot, they just have to whip out their driver's license or ID card. So we want people in their minds to connect the two together. That voting and your driver's license ID card, those records are linked together. So one thing to know is that if someone does not have a valid Florida driver's license or ID, then they have to use this paper form. Okay. And we'll talk about the online registration in just a moment. Once this form is completed, there are sticky strips to remove, and then the voter just folds it up, they seal the edges, and they drop it in the mail. League members never, ever take possession of these forms once they are completed. It is up to the voter to take care of that. And if everyone would be sure that they are muted, please. Okay. There's someone not muted. Just a moment. I need to check this out. Get them muted. And and then I lose the screen. Just a moment again. Okay, there we go. Um, so
Yeah, okay, thanks. I'll put it away.
okay, please be sure that you're muted because that's something that if I have to do it, it kicks me out and I have to do this stop share. So the deadline for voter registration actions, they have to be done 29 days before. They have to be postmarked. They don't have to be received, but they do have to be postmarked. So for the mailers, or if you're sending an envelope for the voter registration form, they have to be postmarked. And so we highly recommend that a voter mail at least 7 days in advance or ask the local postal office to hand postmark. Or the other thing you can do is take it directly to the supervisor of elections office, either the main office or any of the permanent branches. So for the August 18th election this year, the deadline to register to vote is July 20th. For the November 3rd election, the deadline is October 5th. Another question we often receive when we're helping people is what is the difference between a residential versus mailing address? Because you have to put down the residential address on your voter registration form or when you're doing it online. And that residential address is just what it sounds like. It's where you live, where you call home. And this is required because it determines which district you are in for federal, state, county, and city elections, and ultimately where your precinct is for election day. And this cannot be a post office box or any box number. It has to be a street address. Now, the mailing address is where you want to receive, for example, your vote by mail ballot or any other information from the supervisor elections, if it is different from your residential address. Some people, they travel a lot, so they use a post office box as their mailing address. And that mailing address can be the post office box number or any other box number. Okay, now we're moving on to what it looks like if you're trying to register to vote online. So this is the website. It's registertovoteflorida.gov. You can access it directly, or you can access it via the SOE website. And this is what the opening page looks like. The box the red arrow is pointing to is for both new registrations and for updating registrations. So if you are going to register online, the applicants are going to have to prove that they are a resident of Florida and a U.S. citizen. And they're going to do that with their Florida driver's license or Florida identification card. And so when you are registering, you want to essentially have this out so you can look at it because a lot of the questions are associated with your driver's license. One question that comes up on the online is they want to know the issue date of your driver's license. And it is the date listed after the ISS. And so it's not intuitively obvious what it is that they're looking for. So just so you know where to look for that issue date. And then you're also going to have to provide the last 4 digits of your social security number. So after you're in the system, this is the personal identification information page. Can't emphasize it enough. You have to enter the information as exactly, I mean absolutely exactly, as it appears on your driver's license or your ID card. If it's not entered exactly as shown, they're not going to find you in the database. And then you can't complete a new registration or update your registration. So again, your driver's license, ID card are tied to voting. Just keep that in mind. And this is where people are running into a problem if they have that new number, because you put in it in the system currently is your old number. And when you put in the new number, that's when people are getting this little box that says, we can't find you in the system. It's simply a computer connection problem. It's no big deal. It does not affect your ability to vote. So I want to make that clear. So the next to last screen when you're registering for this first time, or even if you're updating your voter registration, this is what it looks like. And this is what ties your Florida driver's license or ID card to your voter registration. Because this is what makes the signature on your Florida driver's license or ID card the signature of record for voter registration for your voter record. Okay, this is what ties it all together. The date that's in the line within that circle, that's the date that you're completing the form. And then this is the very last screen. We suggest that you either print the receipt if you can, or if we're at a tabling event out in the middle of some park, taking a screenshot of this and then keeping that for your records and for for whoever is doing the registration, to keep it for their records, because this is the proof that you have registered. If you can't print it, you can't take a screenshot, then at least write down that reference number that's there pointed with a red arrow, because you'll have a different reference number for every action. In this way, if you go to vote and they say you haven't registered, you can provide them either the screenshot or the reference number, and then they can go back and research and figure out what the problem is. Because you could very well be registered to vote and there's just some glitch in the system. And that way your vote will be validated. We need to remember that obtaining a valid ID for registering to vote or for in-person voting is not equally available to everyone for a lot of different reasons. It could be lack of resources, especially money, is probably one of the primary one, but it's also the time and knowing how to obtain certified documents for birth, marriage, divorce, or court records. So there is an organization that we work with that's called Vote Riders. People often think this is an organization that helps you get rides to the polls. It has nothing to do with that. It's all about helping people obtain the IDs that they need to register to vote. And there is, we have these cards at our table. It's available in both English and Spanish. And in fact, if a person qualifies, the Vote Riders organization will actually pay the expenses associated with obtaining the ID. A lot of times it's not just the money. Sometimes they just need help, how to make the appointments. And Vote Riders, again, that's where they will step in. They will arrange the appointments and even take people to the appointments. And again, we always have this on our table. So if somebody is having problems with IDs, that's the card that you want to give them. And then there's also the issue of IDs for college students. And really it's an issue of what is the physical location. Is the student more engaged in issues at their school home, in which case their residential address may be on that campus, or is it the parental home? In general, for us, the league, we feel that if the student is a Florida resident, that unless they feel strongly otherwise, it's probably best to use their parental home as their residential address on their voter application. And the reason is college students move all the time. They often move year to year. They may even move semester to semester. And so by using the parental home address as a residential address, they kind of have a permanent place where information is going to come. And then they can either vote at home, Like the August election is, they could be doing early voting prior to going up to campus for the fall semester, or they can request that a vote by mail ballot be mailed to their college address. The other issue when it comes to students is actually the ID. Many young people these days aren't obtaining a driver's license. And so we do need to encourage them to at least obtain identification cards from the Department of Motor Vehicles and Highway Safety. Um, if they don't have that driver's license or ID, then they're going to have to register using paper because when you register with paper, all you actually have to have is the last four digits of your social security number. But they probably are still going to need an acceptable ID if they vote in person. And what's happened the last 5 years or so is that most student IDs do not have a photo and or a signature. And so that, again, that becomes a problem. Okay, I'm going to stop now and see if there are any questions in the chat. And there aren't. So I'm going to continue on. Next, we're going to be moving on to educating registered voters on the why, when, where, and what regarding voting. Again, the vast majority of people who are eligible to register to vote in Broward County are registered. They just don't vote. And I want to point out the last midterm election in 2022. There were more people who did not vote than did vote. In other words, it was less than 50% turnout. I mean, that is absolutely pathetic. We want to at least get to a 50% turnout for the midterm election. And that's for the November general election date. It's even worse for the August election date. Usually that's around 20%. Again, get out the vote. That's a whole nother topic, a whole nother different presentation and discussion. We're just focusing on the mechanics today. So what we try to do when we're out there with the community and speaking with people is convince them that it is in their best interest to vote. We harp on it. We emphasize so much. Elected officials, they're affecting every area of their life, which is why it's so important to vote so that your views will be represented. Local elections are just as important as the state or federal elections. And we try to emphasize that. We say it a lot, but it really is true that your vote is your voice. And what we hear from young people is they're just so disaffected by what's happening at the upper echelon of government that they don't want to get involved in politics at all. And so what we've come to say is, well, flip the ballot. Start at the bottom of the ballot on those local elections and learn about them, learn about the candidates and the issues, and at least vote about the local issues. I mean, we would love for them to complete the entire ballot, but at least think about what are the local issues. Because it doesn't matter what level of government we're talking about. The elected officials are making the decisions about some of those services that you receive. Yes, it can be coming from the, federal or higher up in the state and had a negative effect, but even some of the local issues will have an effect on you. Now, one thing that we started using on campuses is we take this 2-by-3-foot poster and we were asking students to check off all the issues that interest them. And it was such a hit that we started taking it anywhere that we can possibly use it. If it's a really windy day outside, we may not be using it. But it's really been a great investment because it gets people to at least stop and talk to us for a moment. It's kind of a hook to bring people in. People are usually willing to give their opinions, maybe not verbally, but they start checking things off. And then we can see what they're interested in and start a conversation. And again, encourage them to vote because, perhaps they're interested in climate change and they haven't put the connection together about how voting for certain candidates or on certain issues affects their particular interest. And then this is an oldie but goodie. Would billionaires spend millions to influence your vote if it had no value? Because we often hear people say, "Well, my vote doesn't count," and we all know that that's not true. So now we're going to have a quiz, and not for everybody to respond to, but just think about in your head, which of these elections are nonpartisan? And by nonpartisan, we mean those elections where the candidate does not have to declare if they are affiliated with a political party. So which of these elections are nonpartisan? And the answer is the school board, county circuit court judges, and then at the municipal level. Those are all nonpartisan. Next question. Which elections require a simple majority, which is 50% plus one to win? There's only two, the school board and the county circuit court judges. And this is why we sometimes have runoff elections in November, although they're on the ballot in August. If they don't get the simple majority, then it has to go to a runoff. So these are the election dates for 2026. August 18th is when we vote in the partisan primaries, but that's also when we have the nonpartisan judges and the school board. And then November 3rd is the general election. And I want to focus in on the August 18th election. It is going to include partisan primaries, but there's an exception to the rule, and I'm going to talk in detail about universal primaries in just a moment. And then you have those nonpartisan judges and school board elections. Florida is a closed primary state. You have to be registered to vote with a political party in order to vote in that party's primary elections. And you have to do that 29 days before the primary election. But what we want to do is emphasize that everyone can vote on August 18th. And just some facts about Broward County at this moment in time. If you're not registered with a political party, you're listed as no party affiliate or NPA. In Broward County, we have over 415,000 NPAs alone. There's more NPAs than registered Republicans. So in other words, 31% of our active voters are NPAs. And many of them don't think that they can vote in August because it's always referred to as the primary elections. And so it's up to us, as well as, all the, supervisor of elections, and they're doing this also, to emphasize that everyone can vote. And so they're not going to refer to them, except where it's mandated by law, as the August primary election. We're just going to refer to it as the August 18th election, because we just want to get everybody out to vote. We want to have greater than 20% turnout for this August election, because there's a lot of important races on the ballot at that time. Okay, I know this is a busy slide, but just sort of bear with me. I want to explain the voting process for primary versus non-partisan elections. So for the partisan elections in August, if the elected office is partisan, such as Congress, State House, for Senate representatives, and our county commission, we can have a Democratic primary and a Republican primary, and whoever wins in the primary then goes on to the general election. You're all aware of that. Now, for the nonpartisan races for judges and school board, all the qualified candidates for that office are placed on the ballot. So in the August election, if you're registered as a Democrat, your ballot will include the Democratic primary races and the nonpartisan races. If you're a Republican, your ballot will include the Republican primary races and the nonpartisan races. And then if you're registered as a no party affiliate, the NPA or independent, your ballot will only include these nonpartisan partisan races. But there's an exception, and that's where it gets confusing, especially because it is called a universal primary. So we have this possibility of having universal primary in August, and that comes about if all candidates for an office have the same party affiliation, and the winner of the primary election will not face any opposition in the general election, the November time period. In other words, there's not even any write-in candidates. Then all registered voters can vote for any of the candidates for that office. And then whoever the winner is the candidate with the most votes. Now, this is really important in Broward County because we almost always have universal primaries on the August ballot. For example, in the August 2024 election, every registered voter had the opportunity to vote for supervisor of elections, clerk of circuit court, and the tax collector, because there were only Democratic candidates. Now, we're still a long ways away from knowing who all the candidates are going to be for certain offices, but right now, for County Commission District 6, this is the Hollywood area, we have 5 Democratic candidates. There's no candidates in any other party so far. There's no write-in candidate so far. If that stays that way, that particular office or elected office will have a universal primary so that everybody in County Commission District 6 can vote. Doesn't matter how you're registered. And right now, this is also true for House District 98. But it can all change because they don't have to qualify until June 8th through June 12th. So again, we just simply want to emphasize everybody can vote in August. A lot of people don't even know that we have an election in August, but that's what we want to get the word out. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing anything showing up in the chat. So I'm going to go keep moving forward. So the November 3rd general election, this is what's going to be on the ballot. It's going to be a long ballot. It's always a very long ballot, especially if we have a lot of constitutional amendments. I think everybody knows this. We have 3 ways to vote in Florida. The way to think about Election Day is that it's your last chance to vote. The league really pushes vote by mail and early voting, as does the supervisor of election. We need to explain to people that the ballot is exactly the same, no matter if you're voting by mail or if you're voting in person, early voting, or on election day. It's exactly the same. It's just a matter of when and where you are voting. And just for your information, this is a breakdown of the voting methods that have been used in the last 5 elections. And you can see, and I think it will probably continue that trend, that there will be fewer people voting on election day and that more people will be doing early voting or vote by mail. So why does the league strongly recommend requesting that vote by mail ballot, even if you intend to vote in person? And there's a couple reasons. The main one is it's just in case you can't go in person to vote or you don't feel safe going in person. A lot of things are happening right now, and some people may not feel safe even to go to early voting. Well, this is where vote by mail comes into play. But the other reason to request it is you can review the ballot and make decisions prior to going to the polls in person. I mean, receiving that vote by mail ballot, that's probably the best reminder that anybody can receive that, yeah, I need to think about when and where I'm going to vote. And we need to emphasize that receiving a vote by mail ballot does not require that you use it. If you change your mind, you can still vote in person. You simply go to the polls, provide your information, your ID, and they're going to look you up in the system. It is going to show that you requested one. But if you didn't vote, if you didn't use that ballot, it's also going to show that you haven't voted. And so all they do is give you a new ballot, and you go and vote. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that we do have a new law that you cannot take the vote by mail ballot into the voting booth. So if you've used the vote by mail ballot, as your cheat sheet in the past, what you need to do is take a picture of it or write down your choices. Before in Broward County, you were allowed to take that into the booth. The poll worker would mark it up so it couldn't go through the scan machine, but you could take it with you to the booth, and that is not allowed anymore. Everyone has to make a new request for vote by mail ballots for the 2026 elections. All the requests for 2024 were deleted at the end of 2024. So we have to make a new request every 2 years. You can do that request by phone, paper, or online, and I'll show you those in just a moment. A best practice is make sure your residential and mailing address are correct before you request it. In other words, update that information before you make that vote by mail request. And the league can help with these requests, just like we do for voter registration. If you're going to use paper, we have more than adequate supply of these supervisor of elections forms for vote by mail requests. They're only valid for Broward County. And so if we are at an event and we encounter somebody from outside of Broward, we do have plain vote by mail ballot request forms. In other words, a statewide application, and along with the envelopes and stamps. But it's up to the voter to mail, not the league. So this is what the outside of the vote by mail request bifold mailer looks like. It's orange. Vote by mail requests, voter registration forms are blue. And they're already pre-addressed and the postage is already paid. This is what the inside of that bifold mailer looks like. This is a photo of the top half. We encourage everyone to use both their driver's license or ID number as well as the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. Again, just to make sure your voter registration record is complete. And if you have obtained one of those new driver license or ID numbers, the ones that have been available now since August 2024, what we suggest is you write new above the number. Again, that's going to alert them that, hey, this isn't going to match what's in the files, and would you please update it? Now, if you want to request a vote by mail for someone else, that's what you can do in the bottom half of the paper request form. But you can also do it online. Everything can be done online. Well, 99% of everything can be done online. And again, you go to browardvotes.gov. It's always big and bold on the website, but the second icon from the left is the vote by mail tab. And when it's easy enough to do. When you're requesting a vote by mail ballot to be sent to a mailing address that's different
No,
from
I'm
what's
just,
already
you
on.
guys eat. I add something. I may, if there's any food left over, I may graze, but I had a sandwich.
Julie, you need to mute yourself.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. So this would be the situation that perhaps first of the year you got busy and you have already gone and requested your vote by mail ballots for this upcoming election. And you have in the file your residential address and the mailing address that you want to use, okay? Well, come May, you realize that, oh, I'm going to be someplace else than I thought I was in August or perhaps November. And so you want to change the mailing address that's already on file. In that particular case, you do have to do it by paper. You can't do it online. So that doesn't probably happen that often, but it's just something to keep in mind. The other thing is that vote by mail requests, they have to be made no later than 5 p.m. on the 12th day before the election. That's the law. And the reason is that the supervisor elections, they're going to need time to mail that vote by mail ballot to the voter. And it used to be 10 days, and now it's 12 days. And it's just dealing with the fact that sometimes our mail can be relatively slow, just the way it is. Now, there are emergency vote by mail requests that can be made. You can't do those until within 10 days of the election. And you are going to have to specify the emergency, affirm it is an emergency, and you have to do this in person by the voter or by the voter's designee. And this uses an entirely different form. So you have made your vote by mail request. How are you going to make sure that a vote by mail vote counts? Because that's what a lot of people worry about with vote by mail. Well, a reason for rejection of vote by mail ballots is sometimes because the voter did not sign the outside of the mailing envelope, or the voter signed the wrong mailing envelope. Right? For example, the husband signs the wife's envelope and the wife signed the husband's envelope. And then that signature has to be close to what is already on file. And again, this is where the Florida driver's license or identification card comes into play. Can't remember how you should be signing it. Is it with your middle initial? Is it without? Is your full name exactly what it is? Again, go to your driver's license. Whatever's on your driver's license is how you should be signing the outside of that mailing envelope. The only reason you might be signing it different is if you have actually updated your signature using a paper form. Just some tidbits of knowledge from the 2024 election. There were 848 ballots that did get rejected because of a signature issue and because the people did not respond to curing the signature. In other words, they did not fill out the correct form that the supervisor of elections would have given them. The good news is that 250 ballots were accepted. But as you can see here, 848 ballots were rejected, 79 because they didn't have a signature on the envelope, 679 where the signature was different from the signature on record, and 90 were signed by someone other than the voter. And this is why we encourage people to include a phone number and an email address so that the supervisor of elections can contact you as soon as possible to get the problem solved. Otherwise, they have to do it by mail, and we know that that can take probably too long for you to be able to cure the problem. Mail early. We have to remind people all the time that the ballot has to be received, not postmarked. It has to be received by the supervisor of elections by 7 p.m. on election day. If they're going to mail it, use the U.S. Postal Service. It needs to be mailed 10 to 14 days in advance of election day. Or they can go and drop it off at the early voting sites. Those drop boxes are only available when early voting sites are open. And a reminder that early voting sites are not open on the Monday before Election Day. They are only available when early voting period, the days and the times for August and for November. So for those people who still have a completed vote by mail ballot, you cannot drop it off at a precinct or a polling site on election day unless that early voting site happens to be a precinct or polling site, or if it's also happens to be the permanent supervisor of elections branch office. A lot of the libraries are used as early voting sites, and they also have these permanent branch offices. So again, you cannot drop it off at the precinct or polling site, but you can exchange that ballot for a new ballot. The fact that we have these permanent branch offices is a real boon to Broward County. 5 years ago, or maybe even sooner, we didn't have these. And that meant that, especially for us out west or in the south of the county, if you went to the precinct thinking you were going to drop off your vote by mail ballot and you couldn't, or you had somebody else's vote by mail ballot to drop off, and they obviously weren't going to be able to vote in person. Those ballots got thrown away because nobody was going to drive all the way downtown and now all the way over to Commercial Avenue to drop it off. But having these permanent branch offices has been a game changer. I mean, I work the polls out here, Southwest Ranches. I can't tell you how many ballots I used to see thrown in the wastebasket. And now that's not happening because there's so many places they can go that are relatively close by. You can track your ballot. Again, it's on browardvotes.gov. You just fill out the information and you're going to get either a text or an email or both about when your ballot's been mailed, when it's been received back at the SOE office, and when it's been counted. I think if you've been in the state long enough, you know that there's some rules for returning vote by mail on ballots of other people. For the voter, they can return, obviously, their own vote by mail ballot. They can do those in immediate family, and definition of immediate family is shown there on the screen, plus two more. For example, they could take two friends or two non-family members, their ballots. Voting in person. We've got a little bit way more to go. I'm sorry, the presentation is on the long side, but it's the only way to get all this information in here. So early voting, it's very convenient because you can vote at any of the early voting locations in Broward. Joe is hoping to be up to 30 by August, spread across the county. Now, the days and time when those early voting locations are open will likely vary for August versus November elections. It's shortened up for August, but November is the full time. If you're going to vote in person, you have to have your photo ID with the signature. If the voter's ID does not display the signature, then the voter has to supply a second form of identification that does show the signature. Again, for Election Day, you can only vote at your precinct polling location from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And again, you have to show your photo ID with the signature. If it's on two different IDs, that's okay, but you have to show them to your poll worker. And these are current valid forms of ID available. There's actually 12 different forms of ID. Again, the problem with a student identification is these days, it often doesn't contain a picture and or a signature. So that may not be that useful for students. Okay, moving on to the very last section of this presentation. We've educated the voter on the why, when, and where of voting. Okay, the other education that the league does is to make sure the voter is an informed voter so that they know who or what is on the ballot and have knowledge about those candidates or issues. And that's where the league's vote411.org website is critical. And I'm going to explain more about it in just a moment. But we also provide information on our league's website, on our homepage. We do candidate forums, and we do the presentation I mentioned earlier, Decision 2026, where we explain the voting process and explain the constitutional amendments and any county charter questions. So not only can you help by becoming a Speaker Bureau speaker, but you can also help us get those invitations to present. And we can present via Zoom or in person. Essentially, we have a projector. That doesn't even have to be supplied to us. It's like, call us up and we'll be there, one way or the other. So I want to show the Vote 411 website. This is what the opening page looks like. All you have to do is enter your address to get started. No information is saved. This page pops up after you hit submit, and you're going to select the preferred language, either English or Spanish, and then you click on the Save and View Races. Parts of Palm Beach County had an election yesterday, so I'm using an address in that district to show the value of Vote 411. And what they had, State Representative uh, District 87 was on the ballot. So what we're seeing here, after you click on View Races, is you're seeing the candidates for that particular office. And underneath their names, you just click on the View Answers, and you will see the candidates' responses to the questions that the league asked. So the Palm Beach County League had a particular set of questions that they asked of these candidates. And that if the candidate responded, you'll be able to view their answers. And you can view those answers side by side. When you have finished reviewing all the candidates' answers in this particular race, then you click on
That's
Next
fantastic.
to move to the next race or the next issue on the ballot. We have moved ahead at the state level, and we've actually already populated Vote 411 with two of the amendments, constitutional amendments, that we know will be on the ballot in November. And so this helps get people introduced to Vote 411 now. So this is Florida Amendment number 1 that's going to be on the ballot. It deals with the Budget Stabilization Fund. And when you click on Read More, you get a whole synopsis about it, and it tells you what will happen if you vote yes, and then what will happen if you vote no. And when you're finished with this particular issue amendment, you click on Next, and you go to the next one on the ballot. It's absolutely wonderful. And before I move on, one thing I want to say about Vote 411 is I want to thank Jane Gross for many years of managing our league's portion of Vote 411, and congratulate Larry Pearson, who I think I saw enter earlier, for volunteering to take over for Jane. I know he's going to do a wonderful job. So something new for 2026, I don't even think I've told Andrea about this yet, but new this year on our table is going to be a flyer with a QR code that will take voters to what is called a link tree. And essentially what this is a landing page or a home page that has multiple buttons, and those buttons serve as links to specific website or web pages we decide are most useful. And the beauty of this is that it means instead of having multiple flyers with multiple QR codes on a table, we'll have just one. And then it also is going to allow us to track numbers better. We'll know how many people access this Linktree site, and then we'll also know how many people click on the links listed in the Linktree. Because one thing we've learned is data is everything. I just got trained on this last night, but I'll have it done before our first community event. And I'm really excited about this. Just having one QR code is going to be great. And listed here are some of the sites that I know that we're going to include on that link tree. And then these are some of the giveaways that we have at our table. We have a card that just says, just vote, do it right, check your status. We used to just give out the business card, and then we got smart and we added the flag pin. We used to just give out the flag pin kind of willy-nilly, and now we put it on this business card. So if you want the flag pin, you also have to take the business card with this information. We've got information on the do's and don'ts relative to social media. And then we have cool stickers, and we have these really cool wristbands that promote our league and Vote 411. If you've got more ideas, let me know. Happy to work with you. So at this point, I hope that you're more knowledgeable about the voting process in elections. There are lots more details we can go into, but there's really no more time, and there's also only so much information that people can retain. But I do hope you will use this knowledge to help the league as we empower voters with education. If you would like to help, you do have to be a member of the league. And I've put our league's homepage, lwvbroward.org. It's only a minimum of $20 to join the league now. And then you indicate if you have an interest in voter services and voter education. Now, if you want to help at the tabling events, because we are doing voter registration, or at least helping people with voter registration, we do ask that members pass the state voter registration quiz. And don't get all excited that this is hard. It's not. You simply read the training document. You can even have the training document open as you take the quiz. And you do need to get 100% on the quiz. And the person to contact is Andrea Sleeper, and that's her email address. And she will provide you with the links for being able to do that. It's also from Andrea that you receive emails requesting your help to volunteer at tabling events. So that is the end. If you've got questions, contact me. That's Elliott, 2 L's, 2 T's at ufl.edu, and then also check out our website. So I'm going to stop sharing. And for people, if you've got questions, if you put it in the chat, oops, let me open up the chat so I can read them. And France, Demont asked, do you have to do the exam every year? And the answer is no. Once you've taken the exam, unless there's some sort of major changes, once you take the exam, it's going to be good. We do ask people to review the information provided. Again, it's kind of like what we did tonight. It's just to bring you up to date as we go into the election. And okay, I think I've answered that question. And Karen is asking, can you repost Andrea's email? Andrea, can you put that into the chat? If not, let me go back and I'll show it on the screen again. And here's Andrea's email, andslee2@gmail.com. Oh, Andrea put it there. Are there any questions at all? I'm happy to answer them. We had questions at noon, and so I kind of tried to incorporate them into this presentation. So maybe we did get everybody's questions answered. Okay. Well, thank you for attending. I apologize for going over a little bit more than what we normally do for a meeting, but there's just, as you saw, there's just a lot of information that we have to kind of know. And don't be concerned about you don't know all of it. That's fine. And I will be sending out a recording along with some cheat sheets that you can have. And we also always have those at our tabling events. So thank you very much for attending. So good night, and everybody have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye-bye.